Well, let's continue now to get more reaction to Biden's victory speech and the results of those elections in the U.S. Of course, counting still continuing in certain states. Pavni Mittal is a freelance journalist based in New York, and she joins us live now. Pavni, thank you so much for joining us. It is just after midnight your time. It's after 7 o'clock our time. I wonder if you could give us a sense. I get a feeling it's going to be one of those things where people in the United States specifically will say, can you remember where you were when you heard news that the election had been called for the Biden-Harris ticket? I think it would have been after 11, around midday your time, when that news broke in the U.S. If you could give us a sense of how that unfolded from where you are on the East Coast.
Yes, of course. It was around, I think, 11:25 when CNN broke the news. And how I found out was I was actually getting ready for work. I was working from home, so I was also making breakfast. So I was just cracking an egg. And because I'm in Manhattan, which is really a deep blue, deep Democratic place, my entire block just burst into cheers, and you could hear people banging pots. And, I had like a cracked egg in my hands. I'm running around trying to switch on the TV, trying to make sure I'm not making a mess of everything. That's when we saw it. And the thing is, you have to realize this was not expected, in the sense that we knew the results were coming, but they were still counting. Pennsylvania hadn't been called yet. It's been, 5 days since election day, which is now election week. So, we all have our stories. And since then, the city has just been celebrating. I think this is a city that really put its hopes in a new president that it felt would do something, also ideologically more aligned with that party. So I think everything put together, it's just been a whirlwind of a week that's just culminated into something that, has been really emotional for a lot of people around. And you can see it on the streets of New York.
Now, New York is also very much the city that Donald Trump calls home. The other city he's called home for the last 4 years is also deeply blue and Democrat supporting. Like over 90% of the people there voted for Biden-Harris. And you saw the scenes of the president making his way back from his golf round, having to go past Biden-Harris supporters after the news had broken there as well. In New York, you've got the very famous Trump Towers, but there's no love lost between Donald Trump and the Big Apple, is there?
Oh, definitely not. In fact, President Trump announced his candidacy from that Trump Tower when he, came down the escalator, very famous, very iconic sort of scene. But since then, I think the way he projected himself, the language he's used, this is not a city. This is, New York City is like the flag bearer of liberalism, international city, many immigrants. I'm one myself. So this is not a city that appreciates Mexicans being called rapists or, having a KKK rally and, agreeing with the fact that there were fine people on both sides. Additionally, I think lately during COVID, and, I've been talking to you guys during that time as well, New York has suffered a lot. And New York felt that Donald Trump didn't really, care about the city because he didn't like the fact that the city didn't vote for him. So I think there's been, they've been at loggerheads. And in fact, I think a couple of years ago, or maybe it was earlier this year or last year, Donald Trump actually changed his residency to Florida, which is actually pretty typical. Older people generally from this region tend to move to Florida because it's warmer, lower taxes. And, people were like, great, we don't care.
Now, it's been interesting to watch the reactions. I mean, still over 70 million Americans voted for Trump, and that's after they saw what kind of president he was and the kinds of policies he was interested in pushing over the last 4 years. So it wasn't surprising to hear President-elect Joe Biden speaking about the need to unite a very, very divided country. But what struck me about seeing the reactions on the streets of, let's call them more liberal cities on the east and west coast of America, is the very diverse groupings of people who gathered to celebrate the win of Biden-Harris, the concerns that they spoke about, the need to control COVID-19, the need to acknowledge the issues of racism, and the need to take a hold of vast unemployment and inequalities in America. One does get the sense that those who support the Biden-Harris ticket are very much interested in seeing the country really move forward.
Oh yeah, most definitely. And in fact, we did speak about the coasts, and those are places that are deep blue. But let's not forget some of the places that flipped. Michigan, Georgia. these are states that house cities with some of the largest black populations, Detroit, Atlanta, and these are the cities, that actually delivered. Of course, Philadelphia, but it's on the coast. But these are two cities that really delivered Joe Biden a lot of, his victory. So we shouldn't forget that as well. And I think people do recognize that there are 70 million people who put their hopes in President Trump. And that also speaks to you about how people see, people in America are so divided that I think sometimes we're living in different realities. For some people, during the first few months, they thought COVID-19 was a hoax. For a lot of blue-collar workers, especially, they lost work, they couldn't go. So you have people who don't believe in masks, you have people who don't believe in vaccines, or there are a lot of people who believe that the election is being stolen, still. So we're living really, and that is the tough task for Joe Biden, that he's speaking a lot about uniting the nation, but it's a lot easier said than done when groups of people just not only hate each other, but they live in completely different realities that are at loggerheads with each other.
Just very quickly, before I let you go, do you believe there's also been much more of a focus and an understanding of how systematically Americans have been disenfranchised in terms of their right to vote? Do you think that this election and just the voting process, and for instance, a story coming out of Georgia where Stacey Abrams got to work and got 800,000 new voters registered in time for these elections, because part and parcel of the Republican modus operandi for many years has been to try and suppress the vote, and especially the votes from communities that could hurt them at the polls. Is there now an understanding, do you think, of how important it is to ensure that more and more people are able to vote and are given the opportunity to vote in a free and fair manner?
Oh, most definitely. I think the biggest success story has been the number of people who actually voted, how invested they were. And, I'm glad you brought up Stacey Abrams, because, that is the shining example. Why did Georgia flip, and how did Georgia flip? Was because people who weren't able to vote all these years were able to. And, voter suppression is a very old story in America, but this is the first time we've seen, one governor candidate who really sort of led the way to change that. And we hope to see the results of that, because, 2 Senate races in Georgia are going to be going for a runoff, and that will decide which party controls the Senate. And this will be happening in January. So we'll see a lot of money and effort, both in turning out the vote and also getting the message across, happening in Georgia.
Fascinating times ahead. Thank you so much for your time tonight till this morning here in the U.S. Pavni Mittal is a freelance journalist based in the heart of New York, as you can hear by the sounds around her. Just